So this is a stitch sampler that I use when I'm teaching crochet. I would recommend that everybody who is, or anybody who's starting out learning crochet, produce something like this. If you're wanting to do blanket work, if you're wanting to do wearables, do clothes, if you're wanting to do amigurumi and plushies, any of that, I would definitely recommend learning your stitches first and producing something like this. When I started crocheting, I literally sat and did single crochets over and over again, double crochets over and over again. Yes, possibly quite deathly boring, and you want to be making something, but it is much more detrimental to pick up a pattern for a beautiful thing you've seen and not be able to do it because you haven't got the skills required in the first place. So what I'm going to do in today's video is talk about the basic stitches. Now these basic stitches, I'm going to talk about how you do them, and I'm going to talk about how they're used. I'm also going to talk about how to recognize them as well. There are, in this little sample, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different stitches shown, and those are the basic stitches. Any other more complicated stitch like jasmine stitch or moss stitch, mixed granite, all of those are usually a mixture or an interesting way of using the basic stitches. So crochet stitches have two parts to them. So what I want to talk about first, before I start showing how we do these, I actually want to start talking about the anatomy of a crochet stitch. Crochet is effectively being very, very fancy in tying knots. It's a very fancy way of tying lots and lots of knots. This is one of the reasons why crochet can't be replicated by machine. You can get knitting machines, you can buy them on the big online retailer place. They're brilliant, they're amazing, but crochet, you cannot actually replicate crochet by machine. There's arguments that you can, and there's machines that do it, but you can't have a machine make crochet without some sort of human assistance. Okay, so all of these crochet stitches have the basic anatomy. They have a similar basic anatomy. So what I'm going to draw first is a crochet stitch. I'm going to do a single crochet to begin with, and I'm going to show you the two parts to it, and I'm going to do a side-on view. Okay, so when I was learning, I started thinking about a crochet stitch looking like a P. Okay, so the right way round, it has a similar shape to the letter P, and I'll show you this in the actual crochet in a minute as well. When you are working into crochet stitches, you're going to be working into the curve of the P. These here are called the posts. I think of the legs, and this area here is that's the top of the stitch. Okay, so that's a bit off. There we go. Let's go down here. Top of the stitch. Excuse my spelling. Let's try that again. Stitch. There we go. Got it. Now, the thing that changes with every crochet stitch is the posts. They change in length. So your basic crochet stitches have different heights. The top of the stitch is always the same. It always has this P shape if you're working, if you're crocheting into the same side. So if you're crocheting round, you will always, when you are working into a stitch, you'll be working into that P. Okay, from the top, all of these stitches look the same. So from the top, if we look down on our work, all of our stitches look like a series of V's, and each V is a stitch. Now that is really useful. Both of these things are really useful also when you're counting stitches. So I'll go back to my sampler, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I was talking about before. So with this sampler here, we have at the bottom, the very, very first row. It's also worth, if you do one of these, or when you do one of these, is making sure you recognize a change in a row. I spend quite a lot of time on Reddit in r/crochet, or some of the crochet help subreddits as well. And one of the common questions is, how many rows have I done? So it is really worth working out and familiarizing yourself with what rows look like. This bottom one here, okay, that bottom row there, that is the bottom of a row of foundation single crochets, and I do have a video on how to do that. If you are struggling to get into crochet, definitely check that video out, because it kind of solves one of the biggest issues that beginner crocheters have. The next row, so that was my row of foundation crochet. This next row here, the red row, the second row there, you can see the difference in the rows because there's a dip. There's just a little dip there. This here is a row of single crochets. The orange row, that is a row of half double crochets, HDC. This here, this one here, is a row of doubles. This here, this one here, is a row of trebles. The blue row, that is a row of slip stitch. The purple, dark purple, is a double and then a chain, which is hidden just underneath the light purple row. And then finally, the light purple row is a single crochet followed by a chain. And that is an example, those are examples of every single basic crochet stitch. Like I said, anything else you will do will be made up of those in new and interesting ways. I will also say that there is no right or wrong way to crochet. If you are producing something that looks like you want it to look, and if it's a wearable or a bag, it's doing the job securely that you want it to do, you haven't done anything wrong. Some people are very much, you must crochet this way, you must crochet that way. No, but I would say when you're starting out, when you're a beginner, do try and learn the correct way, or at least look it up, research it, practice it. If you find a way that works slightly better for you, don't feel like the crochet police are going to come and knock on your door and tell you off, as long as what you're producing looks like you want it to and it's doing the job you want it to. Just a note, I am going to use, I already have done, I am going to use US terminology in this video. I do in all my videos. If you are from the UK, you may see most of the patterns you find online will be US abbreviations. But if you buy something from a magazine, from a supermarket, a crochet magazine, you may find that they use the UK abbreviations. You can find loads of resources online, little charts. I had one saved on my phone for a long time that tells you the difference between them and how to translate between the two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through with you each of these stitches, how they are built, how we actually crochet them, and I'm going to build another one of these with you. So first off, we're going to work on our single crochet. That is SC in patterns, and it is the shortest of the basic stitches. Like I said earlier in the video, the biggest difference between the basic stitches is the height that they produce. This is how, for example, I have a piece of my work here, it just sits off camera. That's how you produce different lengths, how you produce different gaps, how you do things like spike stitches and all sorts of different things using the height that each of those stitches produces. So SC, single crochet, is the shortest of them all. So I have already prepared, I do Peter, here's one I made earlier. This is a row of about 21, I think it was, foundation single crochets. Okay, I do have another video on how to do foundation single crochets, so please check that out. Now, when you start a new row, so I'm working in the flat, when you start a new row, you need to do a turning chain. Now, as I said, each of these stitches has a different height, and the turning chain puts your hook and puts the yarn at the right height to then start across the next row at the constant height. If you are doing single crochets, it's usually a single chain. So I'm going to chain, turn my work. To turn your work means you literally turn it over. So I'm now working on the other side, and you'll see this side, that's my foundation singles, looks different to the side that I have just finished. Sometimes the pattern might say right side and wrong side, depending on what you're making. Some things don't have a right side and a wrong side, but the two sides, if you're working flat and in rows, they will look different. So I've done my turning chain. Now, to do a single crochet, take your hook, make sure that your tension is okay. I'm going to do another video on tension in general. I use tension ring, but if you are a beginner, I would definitely look up a more traditional way. These help me with hand pain, but you do have to have an idea of how tension, what good tension feels like to be able to use them effectively. They aren't an answer to all tension woes. So I'm going to start working across in a row of single crochet. Now, if you remember before, I talked about a crochet stitch having a P shape. You've got your posts, and then this P shape is where you're going to work your next row of stitches through. If you've turned, that stitch is the other way around. Okay, so if you have turned that P that we talked about before, the bit where you're this bit here where my fingers are making this loop, that is going to be the other way around. So I need to look for that in my work, which is where I'm going to put my stitches through. So my first stitch is just here. So for a single crochet, I am going to put my hook through that gap, turned around P. I'm going to yarn over to pick up a stitch. So I've now got 2 loops on my hook. This is why it's called a double crochet in the UK abbreviations, because UK abbreviations work on how many loops there are on your hook when you complete the stitch. In the US, it's how many times you pull your yarn back through the loops on your hook. So double for the UK, and we're going to put it back through once. That's a single in US. So on the row below, I used that gap, and that's where I've worked the first stitch of my next row. And you can see, I hope, because my lighting is getting a bit rubbish, those little V's there, those are the next stitches that I'm going to be working into. So I'm going to do the same thing again, find that loop, that backwards P, put my hook through both loops. Now this is something that beginners have a bit of a problem with. Hopefully, in this rubbish lighting, you should be able to see that there are 2 loops on my hook. That's both loops of that V that we saw, that's the top of the stitch. So I am going to yarn over. Okay, I'm going to pull back through those 2 loops, 2 loops on my hook, yarn over again, and pull through both of those as my second single crochet. I'm going to do this one more time, and then I'll finish the row and we'll come back together and I'll show you the half double crochet, which is the next height. So again, looking for my next stitch, which is there. There's my little V. There is the hole, that little loop of the backward P. I'm going to put my hook in through there. I am going to do yarn over, pull through, 2 loops on my hook. Notice my tension, I can move that hook very, very easily across those 2 loops. So I can move it very, very, very easily, which means my tension is okay. I'm then going to do another yarn over, finish up that stitch. And so now I have 1, 2, 3 single crochets starting my next row. And I'll come back to you in a moment and we'll look at some half doubles. So there is my completed row of singles. Okay, the next row we are going to do in a different colour. Oh yeah, by the way, if your project curls at this point, that is fine. Crochet has a tendency to do this. The more stitches you put in, the less it will curl. So if you are finding your first rows are curling, don't worry too much about it. The next row we're going to do is a different colour. I have done a colour change, an end of row colour change, but I have got a short on how to do that. So if you want to look that up, if you're not sure, if you're wanting to reproduce this project. The next one we're going to do is the half double crochet, or the HDC. Now this is slightly taller than a single crochet, but we're still going to do one chain for a turning chain. So I've done one chain, and then I'm going to try and avoid all of these threads, and we are going to start doing the HDCs, just tying these up a little bit. Okay, so I am intending to do another video on turning chains. Some patterns will say that turning chains count as stitches, some don't. I tend to have them not counting as stitches because I find it makes them work a little neater. Just check what your pattern is, but do make sure that the pattern, you know whether the pattern is counting the turning chain as a stitch or not, because that's when you can come unstuck with counting your stitches. So my first stitch that I want to go into here is that hole there, again the backwards P from the other side. Now with a half double and a treble, what you do is you yarn over first before you start the stitch. Okay, so I've got my working loop. That was the end of the chain one I've just done for a turning chain. I'm going to do yarn over, use my hook to hold on to that loop. Okay, so you can see there my tension's got it stuck on there. Use the loop, and then I'm going to put the whole thing through that P gap that we've talked about. Okay, the rest of it is just like a single crochet that we've just done. So I'm going to do yarn over and pull that back through. Now this time I have got three loops on my hook. Now with the single crochet, we finished it off by doing yarn over and pulling a loop through all of our loops on the hook. We're going to do the same thing for a half double. So we're going to do yarn over, use the hook, pull back through all three, and that's your first half double. Okay, it is a little bit taller than the singles that we've just done. So let's do another one. So again, we're going to find out where we're going to go next. So that little dip, we can see the V. Oh, get my finger out of the way. You can see the V at the top. We're going to go in below that V, and we're going to go below both sides, both sticks of that V. So we're going to do yarn over to begin with because we're doing a half double, and we're going to go in through there. Now if you do only go through one loop or the other, and that's called front loop only and back loop only, which I will do another video, a more advanced video on that, it won't feel the same as the others. It feels much looser. So if you suddenly feel, unless like your tension's gone or you've got a tension ring and you've fallen off the hook or whatever, if it suddenly goes a lot looser, just double check you're going through both of those sticks of the V, both of those loops. So I'm going to do yarn over again, pull back through. I've got three loops on my hook, yarn over again, pull all the way through back, and that is my second half double. And again, you can see there are two V's because I've done two half doubles, and we're talking about that P shape. That's where you will be working your next stitch when we get to the next rope off. So we'll be coming back the other way. So it's this post here is the stitch, and that's where you work in. When we work back the other way, okay, this post here is the stitch, and then it's the hole behind it that counts as the same stitch. One more time, just in case you've not got it, and then we'll meet again and I'll show you some doubles if my light stays okay, because it's getting late. All right, so yarn over through here, so through that backwards P gap for our third stitch. We're going to yarn over, pull back through, three on our hook, and we're going to pull through all in one go to make our third half double. Okay, I'll meet you again in a minute and we'll do some double crochets. Okay, we're back. Another colour. Again, If you don't know how to do a colour change at the end of a row, check out my shorts. So now we're going to do a double crochet. Double crochet is higher again, it's taller again. So this time, rather than doing a single turning chain, we're going to do two. So 1, 2. Turning chain matches approximately the height of the stitch you are going to start that row with. Again, some people do 3 for a double, some people do 2 for a double. It's what works for you. As I said, I crochet reasonably tight, especially when I'm doing the height of my stitches, so I always do 2. So we've done the turning chain, we're going to turn our work, and I'm going to try and not get myself tangled with this yarn. So exactly the same thing again. We're looking for our first stitches. That's first backwards P. That was the last stitch. This here is that little P loop of the last stitch of our last round, and into that we're going to work a double crochet. So a double crochet starts off the same way as a half double. Okay, so again we're going to yarn over before we put our hook into that next stitch. I'm holding that yarn in tension with my hook. Okay, so I've done yarn over. I'm going to pop the hook into that first P. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to pull up like this. I'm then going to pick up, I'm going to yarn over again. I'm going to pick up my yarn, but I'm only going to go through 1, 2. I'm only going to go through this first 2 stitches. So 1, 2, and then I'm going to stop. I lift my hook, and you can see I've now got 2 loops on my hook. Okay, I've got 2 loops on my hook again, and I'm going to repeat the same thing. So I'm going to do yarn over, pull the yarn back through both of those loops, and that completes my double crochet. The nice thing about working in colour work is you can see that that has been worked into that stitch. That stitch has now been worked. My next stitch is right here. Again, that next little V, and that's where we're going to work underneath it. So just show you double crochet again. We're going to do yarn over before we actually work through the crochet. We are going to insert the hook into that hole going underneath both sticks of the V. I am then going to do yarn over again, pull my yarn through the work. Take your time over this. Can you see how but with each stitch I'm pulling it down so I can see those loops. When you get a bit faster, you don't need to do that. But to begin with, don't expect, when you're watching TikTok or YouTube or wherever you get your crochet entertainment from, you will see crochet is working really, really, really fast. You don't need to. Take your time, especially when you're a beginner. Don't think that you should be working as fast as some of the people you see online. Right, so we've got 3 on our hook. So this is why it's called a treble in the UK. And we're going to pull our yarn, we've done yarn over, pull it through first 2, and then stop. We've got 2 more, and then we're going to do it again, hence a double in the US terms. Okay, again, one more time if you haven't quite got it yet. We're going to be working into the next stitch, which is going to be underneath these 2 V's, both sticks. We're going to do yarn over, through, we're going to do yarn over again, come back through. We've got 3 on our hook, yarn over, back through the first 2, yarn over again, and then back through the second 2. Now, what you will also find, and we'll definitely see this with the trebles in a minute, is that as your stitches get taller, your tension changes, and the material you're producing, so the flat crochet work, becomes less dense, becomes more holey. Okay, because crochet will always have holes in it. Single crochet, the holes are smaller. As you make your stitches taller, those holes get bigger. Okay, I'll finish this row and we're back in a minute to have a look at a treble. Okay, before I go away again in a minute and just add the next row, I just wanted to make a note at this point of where the last stitch in a row is. This trips up lots and lots of beginner crocheters. You should count stitches. I'm sorry, but there isn't really a way around that, especially if you're starting out. I didn't, and I've got so many projects that I've had to frog or put in my work in progress pile box room because I've not counted stitches. You need to. Stitch markers are very useful for this. Stitch markers don't have to be these things. You can buy these, the little locking stitch markers. They can be a piece of spare yarn that's in a not coordinating colour, in a contrasting colour. Safety pins, whatever. I would suggest when you're starting out that you put, when you start your row, so for example, like we did here, when you have done your first stitch, pop a stitch marker through both of those loops in that V. Again, you can buy these, you don't need to, you can just use some thread or some yarn. Put that in your first stitch when you make it through that P, remember the loop, P loop? Because when you come back to that, I'm going to leave that actually, and when we come back on our trebles you can see how it works, but without them. So we've been working this way across this row, and when we're working this way, your posts and then the gap behind, so not the gap behind, sorry, the posts and then the next gap, that is one full stitch. It's the reversed P. So it means when I get to the end of here, this looks like a bit of a, is there actually a stitch there? Is there not? Now, if I turn this up, you can see that there is a V there. And because we've been talking about the fact that posts and then the place you're going to work your stitch through is next, I need to put another stitch in here. Okay, so I'm just going to do a double and I'm going to find that gap. I am going to pull up a loop. I'm going to do yarn over. I'm going to do yarn over again. And that is the end of my row. Otherwise, you'll find that your work is going to be unintentionally decreasing, and then your work will get skinnier and skinnier as you go up. Right, I will be back in a moment and we will carry on with some trebles. Right, okay, we're back. I've changed colour and we're going to now do trebles. Now, if you are doing amigurumi, plushies, those sort of things, trebles isn't something that you will really come across. You very rarely come across doubles in doing amigurumi, but it is worth knowing how they work. And if you do want to branch out into more complicated patterns and such, wearables, definitely use trebles a lot because they work up quite quickly. It's definitely worth knowing them. And the last two stitches I'm going to be doing slip stitch and chain stitch, that you will need to know, especially slip stitch for doing amigurumi. Okay, so the treble is the tallest of them all, and so we're going to do a taller turning chain, and I'm going to do a 3 turning chain. Okay, I'm going to make sure it's tight. Try not to get myself all tangled in the yarn. I should really be weaving in ends as I go, but we all wish we could do that. Now, treble. Okay, now with a treble, you are going to wrap the yarn. You do yarn over twice before you start your stitch. So I'm going to do yarn over and I'm going to do yarn over again. Trebles, if you haven't worked out your tension, are really tricky. Okay, they are really, really tricky if you've not worked out how to keep your tension. As you can see here, I am not moving the yarn from through my tension ring, and it's staying on my hook. What I am doing is, I'm going to have to set this up again. Underneath here, I'm pushing this part of the yarn against my work as well. That's how I now have found the best way to control my tension. It's a mixture of the tension in the tension ring and me actually using the rest of my hand. So anyway, 1, 2. Again, I'm using my hook to keep the yarn. I'm using the end, the actual hook part of my hook, to keep my yarn on my hook. And before, just like we did before, I'm going to come down. I'm going to go through the first stitch of my previous row, and I'm going to pull up a loop. So now I have 4 loops on my hook. I'm going to do yarn over again, and just like we did with the double, I'm going to go through 2 and then stop. I've now got 3. Yarn over again, go through 2, I've got 2 left, yarn over again, and I'm going to go and finish my stitch. Okay, so this is my turning chain here, and I've gone into the first stitch. This is just more the next stitch, this is the first stitch. So with the work I'm doing, this turning chain does not count as a stitch itself. And what I can do, because I'm being good, I can put a stitch marker in the top of that first stitch. When I've done a few more, I'll come back to that and I'll show you exactly where it is. Because, as I said before, the thing with trebles is they make a much looser fabric, and so this is why this all looks a bit wonky at the moment. Same thing again, yarn over my hook twice, using the tension to hold the yarn on the end of my hook, goes into that next stitch under both sticks of the V, yarn over, pull it back up, 4 on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over again, pull through another 2, and then yarn over again and pull through another 2. Now each of these steps, each of these pull through, so again got 2 yarn over, find my next stitch which is there. Each time we pull through 2, it is just the same as when we did a single crochet at the beginning. So yarn over, 1, 2, yarn over, 1, 2, yarn over, 1, 2. Okay, so if we think back to the anatomy of a stitch that I talked about at the beginning, oh, I've managed to get the same colour stitch marker as my yarn. That was not intentional, I promise. So when we talked about the anatomy of a stitch right at the beginning of this video, we talked about this idea of there being a P at the top and that being the same for every single stitch that we're talking about, these basic stitches. And it is. Again, you can see the V at the top. I've done 3. So 1, 2, 3 V's. That's where we're going to be working our stitch through next time. And this is the post. The post on each of these is just longer. And that's what you create when you pull through those loops. You create a longer post. Okay, treble one more time. 1, 2, yarn over, holding it with my hook, into my next stitch, the next unworked stitch, yarn over, 4 on the hook, 1, yarn over, 2, yarn over, 3. And that's why it's a treble in the US terms and why it's a quad in the UK terms. Okay, right, I'm going to get to the end of this row and then we'll have a look at what's happening with this stitch marker. Welcome back. So this is quite interesting. After I left you, so these were the first few that I did on camera. Now the rest I did more at my normal speed, and you can see that there's a difference in tension and there's a difference in height, and this is one of the issues with trebles. So if you're working purely in trebles and you care how tall your work is, especially for wearables and things, you've really got to be careful with your tension because it does change the dimensions of what you're making. Now I've come to the end of my row and you can see here that I am at the end, and you can see where my stitch marker was, where I put in my first. So I know now that that's my turning chain. I don't want to do anything to do with that. This is where I want my last stitch to go. I'm just going to show you trebles again a couple of times, just because. So loop round twice, and again we're going to go into the next stitch, the second to last, and we're going to pull up our loops. Now one of the things, I did something wrong there. I don't know if you saw that, but the loops on my hook did not look right, so I'm going to redo that. Try and get the light sorted. That's better. So we're going to go now. If you're having troubles with trebles, I hold the bottom here as I make the rest of my stitch, and I move my fingers up, just holding the post as I complete the stitch. I found for me that makes them a lot easier. Then last one, take out that stitch marker. We can see there's the post of the previous double, there's the V that we need to work into, twice round, top yarn over twice, in through that backwards P loop, and 1, 2, and 3. I'll be back in a second and we'll look at slip stitches. Okay, slip stitches. Now, slip stitches are the shortest by far of all of the basic stitches. They are very, very rarely used to actually make up the work or the fabric. It gives a very, very dense fabric, has no drape. Slip stitches are usually used to join rounds, and they are used to get you from one place to another in lace work. But I'm going to show you what a slip stitch is, largely so that you don't do it by accident, because some people do. Okay, they think they're doing single crochet, but they're doing slip stitch. So I'm going to chain 1. Don't really need to, because this stitch is so short. You've got your working loop on your hook. You're going to go like you would for a single crochet, like the first one we did, and I'm going to do yarn over, and I'm going to pull that back through, and then we've got 2 on the hook like we would for a single crochet. But we're not going to use this yarn. Instead, we're going to grab that loop and pull that loop back through the other loop on the hook. Okay, I'm going to do that again, and I'll show you again. So here is our second backwards P from our second, well, our second to last treble from the last row. We're going to go, the hook going to go in through there. We're going to do yarn over, pull it back, two loops on our hook, and we're going to pull that loop back through the first. You can also see, actually, as I'm working this, as I'm talking about the stitches getting longer, how much less dense the fabric gets, how much more holey. With this size hook and this size yarn, I'm working with DK, 100% acrylic and a 4mm hook. It's almost like mesh work, the trebles. It makes really nice clothes and tops and things. So we're going to do a slip stitch again. So we're going to go through my next stitch underneath both of those V's. I am going to do yarn over my hook and pull that loop through. Then I'm going to pull that through the second loop on my hook, and that finishes another slip stitch. Now you can see here, can you see how that P from the previous round is really big? That's because when I was doing the rest of those trebles much more quickly than I was with you at the beginning, my tension changed. And so that's why that head of this treble is so much bigger, because my tension, I wasn't being as careful about my tension because I was doing it quicker. One more time, and then I'll meet you at the end. So through, you put your hook through, you do yarn over, so yarn over, your yarn comes over your hook, pull both those through, and then, so pull through one loop, pick up a loop, and then pull that loop through the other loop that was already on the hook. And you can already see that the tension of this is really high. It's in fact so much higher than the row below. It's pulling it together. That's how high my tension is as I'm doing these slip stitches. I should have loosened my tension for these. I will have a go at loosening my tension, and I will be back in a moment, and we'll look at some chain stitches to finish. To the end of that slip stitch row, and you can see here where my tension was too high when I was demoing it, so I've intentionally over the rest of the row reduced my tension, and it's sitting quite a lot better. Slip stitch makes a really interesting row, because if you look, you can actually see the stitch. So there's the V's, you see those are the V's of the previous, that's the tops of these trebles, and they're still visible on the other side. And this side we have a row, just a row of that colour. Quite interesting that it has such different sides. So we've come to the end, and again I had my green stitch marker, which I'm going to chuck out. You can see hopefully that having that stitch marker in shows us it's much more obvious where that last stitch of the row is. Yarn over, I'm going to come back this way, pull through the loop on the hook, and that's finished my row of slip stitches. I'll back in a sec and we'll look at chain stitches, and that's going to be our last basic stitch. Okay, so this is the last stitch we're going to look at because I am losing my light. So we finished on the last row doing slip stitches. I'm back on the other side, so you can't actually see those blue stitches because we're on the other side. You can just see the V's of the tops of the treble from before. Now, however much I dislike crocheting into a chain as a foundation for the work that you're doing, chain stitches are absolutely essential if you are wanting to do granny squares, or if you want to do lace work or mesh work, pretty much everything. Especially, and if you're wanting to do any sort of combination stitch, so like moss stitch or mixed granite, or granite stitch or mixed grit or jasmine, all of those will have you working into chains or working around chains, should I say, and doing chain stitches. So I've started this row already, and I've done a double, chained, double crochet, and then chained. This is going to be a bit of a pain because working into a row of slip stitch is annoying, but if you were doing this and you were working into a row of normal stitches, it would just be like we've done the last few times. So if a pattern calls for a chain stitch, that would be CH in the pattern, it means making a chain, just like you did, or like you would have done if you were doing a foundation chain for the start of your work. Now when you make a chain, so I've made a chain here, to keep my number of stitches the same in each row, I skip this stitch down here. Okay, so I've got a stitch down here, I'm going to skip it, and the next stitch, which I'm going to do another double, and please excuse how awkward this is because I'm crocheting into a slip stitch. There we go, got it. Yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 on your hook, goes through one, and then goes through another. And so I've made a bigger hole, and I've completely skipped this stitch here, is unworked, nothing gone through there. So I'll just show you again. So a chain stitch, we're going to chain like this. Okay, just put yarn over, pull through the loop, and then I'm going to do a double, and I'm going to leave a skip stitch because of the chain I just made to keep my numbers of stitches the same. I'm going to do another double, I'm going to put yarn over, I'm going to go through, why do I make things difficult for myself? And yarn over, go through 2, and go through another 2 to finish that double. Okay, and so you can continue in that vein all the way across the row. Now I am running out of light, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my original sampler, my stitch sampler. So you can see there, these here, this is my row of doubles, and then my chain, when I came across back the next row, I've actually worked a single crochet. Hopefully by now you might be able to start recognizing the stitches. So this is a short stitch, it's got 2, you can see the 2 loops there, and there's the P. Actually we're going to go around, aren't we? So there's the P that would be for that stitch, and you can see how you can build up a stitch because it will ask you to work around the chain. Now these spaces, you can see I've got the finger through there, that's called a chain space. Okay, and so patterns will say work into chain space. It means you're not putting your stitches, your new stitches, into the top of a previous stitch, you're actually working them around that chain. I am going to do a granny square tutorial. There's millions out there, but I don't feel that my channel will be complete with that one, and we'll talk more about that then because it's definitely part of making a granny square. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you get a chance to have a go at your own sampler. Just the wool I've used is mostly WI premium acrylic from Hobbycraft, which I think is quite hard to get hold of at the moment, but I've also used Stylecraft. Oh no, Wendy's Supreme Decay, that's the other one that's maybe a little bit more easy to get hold of. I hope you get a chance to make your own. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel and check me out on all of the other social media type places. Okay, thanks. See you next time.